Ladies and gentlemen, dare to dream that the dawn is breaking on an independent, united kingdom. You patronising, snuck-up snob. How dare you? How dare you tell people they didn't know what they were voting for? Farage. I know you want to ban our national flags, but we're going to wave you goodbye.
You might have seen me going out into the English Channel, highlighting that the number of migrants illegally coming to Britain by boat was increasing.
This is a story that isn't to be told, but you know what? Today, we're going to tell it. You can see the boats absolutely packed, all being charged a minimum of €5,000 each for the criminal gangs to make this crossing.
Who are you? I'd never heard of you. Nobody in Europe had ever heard of you. Emergency election announcement. This election needs a bit of gingering up. So I am going to stand in this election. I'll be launching my candidacy at midday tomorrow in the Essex seaside town of Clacton. So midday tomorrow, Clacton, at the end of the pier. Perhaps more important than that,
You cannot barrage the Farage.
Yesterday was a sobering day again, wasn't it, in remembering the sacrifice made on the beaches of Normandy. It certainly wasn't a day for staged photo ops, as we saw from Nigel Farage.
Hang on a second. Yes. I raised £100,000. I raised £100,000 for the London Taxi Charity to send veterans back to Normandy. That's why I was there. Thank you.
And it certainly wasn't a day for...
How did you feel when you realised that he had attended the British event and other parts of the day, but he left before the international event at the end of the day?
I don't want this issue to become a political football, because I think that does them a
Well, it already is. It already is, because the veterans themselves are speaking out saying he's let the country down. And to say that it's a mistake, if his instinct was the same as the British people, he would never have contemplated for a moment not being there for the big international ceremony. And it shows how disconnected he is with the people of this country.
The answer to Ashani's question, how would you ensure she graduates into a fully functioning NHS?
NHS, well, I'm going to answer it. Because the more money we spend, the less delivery we get, which means the model is wrong. The model through which we fund health is wrong.
So this is Nigel telling us he doesn't believe in the NHS. This is what he's doing. He's telling the public he does not believe in the NHS.
No, I'm telling you the funding model.
That is what you want to do.
And you in Scotland, of all places, I mean, look, the NHS is very badly run. Let's change the funding model.
We'll not be
Would you like more private? You'd like more private healthcare?
No, let's change the model.
The Hill Foundation and the King's Fund have done an analysis of different funding models. What makes a big difference, most of all, is the amount of money you put into your health service.
And the Green Party.
And independent experts say.
It works. Let's learn from it.
I'd like to hear from Carla Denyer on this.
Migrants, and this race to the bottom on migration, driven by Nigel Farage, followed by the Conservative Party, and hotly chased by the Labour Party, does not serve Scotland's interests.
Nigel Farage.
Well, I mean, I'm on a platform tonight with 6 other people whose parties have been wholly unconcerned with the issue of immigration. They think that to even question it somehow makes you a bad person. Let's get back to Lorenzo's question. Let's deal with some logic, shall we? From the end of the 1940s
That'll be a novelty for you.
until Mr. Blair got to power, listen to the numbers. You probably don't know them. 4.3 million the Conservatives have let in. Most of those that come in are not directly productive members of the economy. Most of those that come in are actually dependents.
Most of those coming to the UK today are on work visas or are international students.
About 50% of those that come are dependents. Whether they're coming with work visas,
the rules are changing.
Family
on that.
reunions. We've even had, under the Conservatives, students coming and bringing their mum. The whole thing's been unbelievable.
Nigel Farage wants to make this an immigration election for his own self-interest. Let's change the tone. Change the tone. Too much of it is framed around, frankly, the bigotry of people like Nigel Farage.
Please. Is that the best you can do?
Penny Mordaunt can't stand up to Nigel Farage because she wants her party to be like Nigel Farage.
They're the opposite.
Angela Rayner can't stand up to Nigel Farage because of the shift in her party to the right. Plaid Cymru will stand up to Nigel Farage.
Open doors,
on
everyone
immigration.
come.
Of course we need
Everyone
rules.
come.
Of course we need
Benefits
rules.
for everybody. Lovely.
Labour will put your taxes up.
Was that the
if
question?
you having more agency, being able to get onto the property ladder, that is
Penny Morton, I am going to remind you of the question.
Election.
Lorenzo's question.
Just with regard
the problems that he set out. He said, I think immigration is partly to blame. What are the parties going to do about immigration?
Labour will put your taxes up.
Was that the question?
If you have controlled numbers and a cap under us, or uncontrolled immigration under the Labour Party.
How have you got
And
the front to say...
let's let Angela Rayner respond to that charge of having no plan. Your party's...
That is why at this election you need to ignore the snake oil salesmen who delivered Brexit, and you did that because you were terrified of Nigel Farage. The worrying thing for me though is, it's not Nigel, it's the SNP.
Well, Linda, I have to say, I think this has been one of the worst general election campaigns so far between the two main parties I've ever seen in my lifetime. It isn't just that their leaders are dull, very dull in the case of Labour. I mean, sort of Blair without the flair. I mean, the real leader of the Labour Party is here tonight on the stage. At least she's got some personality. We've got Rishi Slippery Sunak. You know, he's fed all the lines to Penny Morton, don't believe any of it. I think it isn't just our public services that are broken. I think our political model is broken. The arguments that are going on the other side of the room here, when the truth is, they don't really disagree on anything. Fictitious numbers like £2,000, £3,000. And that's why Reform have risen so quickly in the polls. There's a sense we need a revolt against this system. We need an electoral system where we get some proportional representation in Parliament. We need to break up the current model. If we get a new kind of politics in Britain, we might just get some real change. What we're being offered, frankly, are two parties promising the earth, and nothing much will change regardless of who gets in. Although I think the breach of trust on manifestos with the Conservatives means they're probably sunk below the waterline. New politics, fresh start. We want a revolt from the British people. That's what I'm after.
And of all the things that the Conservatives have broken, the worst thing that I think they've broken is people's hope.
Do you remember going back on the tuition fees pledge?
The Liberal Democrats will fix nothing.
On
Net
this
zero
topic.
is a bad policy and it's bad for people.
What matters to you more, economic growth or successful climate policy, was the question. Carla Denyer.
Well, Nigel's going to keep your fact checkers busy for a little while. Nigel Farage has been misleading you. I'm an engineer. I used to work in the renewable energy sector. I know very well how wind farms work. So much of what he said there is simply untrue.
Subsidy.
Everyone knows that they can't trust the Conservatives or Reform when it comes to climate, and that's part of the reason why the Conservatives are on their way out at the general election.
Hang on, let her answer.
Stop and search. And of course, we don't do it. Oh gosh, if this area has got a high proportion of people from the black and ethnic minority communities, they might call us racist. We've got to stop doing this.
But it has to be used in a targeted way based on evidence, not on profiling.
Nigel Farage?
We do know the areas in which knife crime is the most prevalent, and there is no question, that we are scared.
And those are the areas with the most inequality, which is why tackling inequality is an important part of the answer.
That may be what you have to do to solve the problem ultimately, by giving people equality of opportunity.
Do we not want to solve the problem ultimately? Is that not the point?
But you can't give people equality of outcome. We're scared of our own shadow here. We're not going to deal with the question unless we stop being scared of ourselves.
Okay.
We go out and do what needs to be done.
But it is time now to go to the party's final thoughts. Nigel Farage.
Unlike the other six, I don't need an altar cue. I'm here because I believe in what I believe in. Our politics isn't working. You've heard these pathetic arguments tonight between the two big parties. Really, there isn't much difference. But electorally, Labour are going to win. The debate is who forms the opposition in the next Parliament? Who fights for the rights of ordinary British people? Who fights to control our borders? Who fights for men and women running small businesses? Reform UK is about to become a political phenomenon, an historic one. So I urge you, join the revolt.